Hi everyone, it's Lady Genevieve. Today's video is going to be about Netflix's Shadow and Bone. More specifically, I'm going to be talking about the adaptation of Six of Crows. I already made a video about this topic, but the last time I talked about it, I was only discussing the adaptation of the first Shadow and Bone book. At the time of me making that video, I had not read any other books in the Grishaverse, but after I posted it, I got a few comments of people telling me that I should read Six of Crows and talk about that being included in the show's first season. I covered a lot of ground in that first video, so if you have not already seen it, I would suggest that you watch it first, and I will make sure that I link it in my pinned comment so that you know where to find it. I still haven't finished the trilogy, although I do plan on doing so for the sake of completion. After I posted that video and I had people telling me that I needed to read Six of Crows, I went ahead and jumped right to that. Just like my first video, this will not be a book review, so if that's what you are after, there are plenty of booktubers here on this platform that are much better options than me. I am specifically going to be talking about the material as it applies to adaptation into live action. If you have been following along with the announcements related to the television series, then you will know about various casting announcements. The show will be including Six of Crows, but more so as a prequel. There are multiple lead characters from the Six of Crows duology that have not been announced as far as casting goes. In the main crew, we have Wylan, who I have not seen cast at all, as well as key villains including Van Eck and Pekka Rollins. There are 8 episodes set to be in season 1 of Shadow and Bone, and when I had only read that book, I was a bit concerned of how they were going to fill that out because of how that first book was limited by only being from Alina's perspective, but a lot of the issues that I had with that book were completely fixed by Six of Crows, and I'm not really all that concerned about how it's going to turn out in live action anymore. Six of Crows differs significantly. The perspective jumps from one lead character to another, so you get a much more thorough exploration of the layers of all of these characters and what they are experiencing throughout this really intense adventure slash heist that they're on for the duration of the series. The story also has a much larger scope. Alina spends the majority of the first book cooped up in a palace, whereas in Six of Crows, these characters are engaging in so much action for the vast majority of the story. There is, of course, always that possibility that the television series will differ significantly from the source material. At the very least, we know that they decided to make the change of having Alina be half Shu, and it seems like they want to really explore the depths of what that character trait can add to her story. If I were to speculate on every hypothetical change that they could do to the material, I would be sitting here for hours, and nobody wants to see me talking about this for hours. Least of all me, because I do not want to be editing for that amount of time. So for the sake of clarity and organization, I'm just going to speak about the adaptation of the material and these characters with the hypothetical premise that they're going to try to stay fairly close to the canon. If you go to the Shadow and Bone IMDb page, there are some bits of trivia that you can get that can help you to form a picture of how the series might turn out to be. The only characters from the Six of Crows duology that are listed as being present for all 8 episodes are Kaz, Inej, and Jesper. My best guess, since the duology is largely centered around them doing heists, is that we will get to see them do some sort of heist, albeit smaller in scale compared to what happens in the actual duology over the course of this first season. Part of the benefit of adding Six of Crows into this adaptation of the show's first season is not only the fact that it fills out more of the story, but also because it expands the scope of the world building. Shadow and Bone takes place in Ravka, but if we are also adapting Six of Crows, then we're probably going to see Ketterdam as well. There is an excerpt on page 401 of Six of Crows that caught my eye when I was trying to think of what sort of story they might be putting together for those characters. When he was 14, Kaz had put together a crew to rob the bank that had helped Hertzun prey on him and Geordie. His crew got away with 50,000 Krug, but he'd broken his leg dropping down from the rooftop. The bone didn't set right and he'd limped ever after. So he'd found himself a fabricator and had his cane made. It became a declaration. There was no part of him that was not broken, that had not healed wrong, and there was no part of him that was not stronger for having been broken. The cane became a part of the myth he built. No one knew who he was. No one knew where he came from. He'd become Kaz Brecker, cripple and confidence man, bastard of the barrel. As soon as I read that, I thought to myself, is that the story they're going to adapt? The core trio from Six of Crows that is going to be appearing in the show all have some pretty dark and twisted things in their origin stories. There's Kaz losing Geordie, there's Inej getting kidnapped and sold into working in a brothel as a child, and of course there's Jesper first developing his gambling addiction. I think for this show it would be cool to not only see them as baby criminals developing their skills, but if we could also see them receive some of their key totems that they have in these books. There's Kaz with his cane, Inej has her shoes, and Jesper has his guns. If that specific job is the one that they decide to go with instead of creating something completely original, it would be really cool to see them receive those totems along the way. I am very curious about how they're going to portray Kaz's inability to touch people. I'm going to assume that he will already have his gloves by the point that we see him introduced in the show. But part of me also wonders if they will avoid revealing that as much, if they want to wait and take their time to peel back the layers on that character, since he is the type of person that would keep so much of that to himself. I think the people in charge of the show will have to take a slightly different approach to adapting Kaz and Inej's characters specifically, since when you are reading a book, you have access to these characters' internal monologues, their running train of thought, and we as the audience get informed about a lot more of what's going on underneath the surface that doesn't really come out externally. So when you have to tell the story through filmmaking, it's going to fall a lot on the writing as well as the actors to emote. Of course, they're going to have lines to say, but I think a lot of their expression is going to say a lot, or it should anyway, if they're doing their jobs right, of being tormented, of longing, of regret and sadness. Personally, out of the core trio, I think I might like Jesper the best. Not even out of this core trio, but when it's all 6 of the characters in the books. Maybe it's predictable, but I just really like Jesper. We love a bubbly, biracial, biconic character that has so much personality and charm, and he can't stop flirting. I love it. Ketterdam is a twisted, cutthroat place, both literally and figuratively. So we need some levity to provide contrast to that, and that is what Jesper is here doing, and I love it. While everyone else is being consumed by violence, Jesper is the epitome of, honestly, I came out to have a good time, and I'm feeling very attacked right now. Moving on to some of the other characters from the duology. As I mentioned before, Wylan has not been listed in any of the announcements, and he's not on the IMDb page, so I'm going to assume that he will not be appearing in this season, which of course means that we're going to need to make sure we give Jesper ample time to flirt with both men and women, because it's very important to blatantly depict that he is in fact bi. Next, we have Nina and Matthias. I don't know if I will upset people by saying this, and this is just a theory, of course. Everything that I'm saying in this video is just me making guesses or me giving my opinions. But I don't necessarily think that Nina and Matthias are going to meet in this season. I don't know if they're really going to interact at all. If we follow the hypothetical that they're going to try to stay fairly close to the book canon, then we have to remember that Nina was a character that is from Ravka, and she was training under the likes of Genya and Zoya. Nina's recollection of Zoya is one that is very positive. She's tough, but she's still somebody that she admires and respects and holds in high regard. Zoya, in the first book, which is the only one that I've read so far out of that trilogy, was nothing more than a stereotypical mean girl. I don't even know if Genya and Zoya would be in a position where they're helping to train Nina on anything. She might just be a secondary character in Ravka at the Darkling's palace for all we know. And another thing to take into account is you can see on IMDb how many episodes these different characters are appearing in. Nina is only listed for episodes 3, 5, 6, 7, and 8. We only see Matthias listed as appearing in one episode. Episode 7. Now, I don't have this social media post saved. It's probably floating around somewhere on the internet, maybe on a fan page. I'm not really sure. But I distinctly remember at one point Leigh Bardugo, that's the author of the books, had said something online about how we as an audience are going to see Fjerda, which is a fictional place in the books if for some reason you're watching this and you don't already know about the Grishaverse. So my best guess would be that we are going to get more of a glimpse at Fjerda as a place and the people that are there and a lot of their more bigoted attitudes towards the Grisha as a people, and it will magnify the threat that the Grisha are facing in this world, and it could maybe not justify necessarily, but give more context to why the Darkling is so desperate for Alina to get her powers up and running. If we use Game of Thrones as a reference, I know that there is plenty of other fantasy material that exists, but Game of Thrones is a reference that I think a lot of people will understand, regardless of whether or not they are avid consumers of fantasy as a genre. You have to remember that there were so many characters and so many places in that show that there were plenty of lead actors that did not film scenes with one another for several years, or maybe not ever, depending on if they didn't survive very long. Jason Momoa. But the point is that regardless of whether or not we see actors posting on social media of them being best mates and having so much fun together, that does not mean that they are filming scenes with one another. The only thing that I can think of off the top of my head about people posting that they filmed scenes together was Jessie May Lee talking about filming scenes with Ben Barnes, but we all know that Alina and the Darkling are going to have scenes together. It doesn't matter how much you hypothetically warp the source material into a live-action adaptation, we know those two are going to have scenes together because it's YA content and you need your heroine to have some romantic tension with a bad boy. But getting back to Nina and Matthias, I did try to briefly entertain the hypothetical that they would maybe blur the timelines a bit of the trilogy and the duology to have them overlap a bit more, but then it just started to unravel very quickly and there was no way for me to keep it all organized and easy for me to discuss in a YouTube video, because if Matthias and Nina are already in Ketterdam and out of Ravka, then does that mean that they have any ties to the other set of characters, the ones that are in Ravka? Does Nina still have that history with Ganya and Soya? Does Matthias have any actual material to play if he's already in prison? So really, it made more sense to me to think that maybe they're just all separate entities floating around in their different locations, just living their lives. I think that all of us who have read some of or all of the books in the Grishaverse will have a better sense of what might come once more of the promotional material starts coming out, and I have no idea when they're going to start doing that because of everything that's going on in the world. I don't know if these actors have to do any ADR, and if they do need to do some ADR, how are they going to do that? You've got a bunch of lead actors that are based in London or somewhere in the UK. You've got Ben Barnes, who is based in LA. Yulian Kostov is back in Bulgaria, so really I have no idea how simple that would be to do at a time like this. Typically, I would expect that the first promotional material would be some still images, but if they want to just jump to a first trailer, then there are a couple of key things that I would be looking for. I think the main character that I would be looking at, especially from the Six of Crows trilogy, to try to get a sense of what sort of adaptation this might be in relation to the source material, is Kaz, simply because there are certain visual cues that you can look for to see where they're going to start his journey. If we see him with the cane, if we see him wearing the gloves, those are all clues of where he is at in his personal journey. The cane is really the main one because I'm just going to assume that he's already wearing his gloves. If we see a trailer where Kaz Brekker is walking around completely able-bodied, no limp in sight, then we'll know, ooh, that's probably going to happen this season. And I'm so sorry if you, for some reason, watched this far and you're upset by that hypothetical spoiler that, yeah, he's going to get physically injured in a fantasy show. Of course people are going to get physically injured. I will be shocked if any of these lead characters don't undergo some type of bodily damage. Oh, by the way, this is a tangent that has nothing to do with the Six of Crows duology, but I didn't realize when I made my first video that apparently Baghra is only going to appear in one episode. How is that the choice that you're making? She should be in at least half of them. Are you kidding me? All those visits? Are they just gonna montage her? Are you about to montage Baghra? Ooh. Anyway, getting back to the discussion of promotional material, we as people who have read books from the Grishaverse have to keep in mind that Netflix is a massive platform, so for them to consider a show to be successful, it needs to be reaching an audience far beyond just the people that have read anything from the Grishaverse. So when they're cutting a trailer together, there are things that they could put in that might not necessarily be spoilers about the main dramatic narratives of the first season, but they might be ways for people who have read books to get a sense of what sort of adaptation this is going to be. I'll put out a hypothetical example. So if we were to see two characters, let's say Alina and Inej, in a scene together in the trailer, then we will know that whatever they're doing is going to be something completely different from the books. Personally, I will not be upset if they decide to deviate significantly from the source material. I only care if the show is good. So those are some thoughts that I have about Six of Crows being adapted into the first season of Shadow and Bone. I'm sorry if this video wasn't as interesting or entertaining as the first one. When I made that other one, it was a bit easier to poke fun and make jokes and find quotes to read, but considering that this is a prequel of Six of Crows that's supposed to be happening in season 1, I can't realistically be drawing on the duology and referencing all these different quotes about what's potentially going to be in the show, because for all we know, it's going to be veering off in a completely different direction. And honestly, I'm a little concerned because even if the show is fairly successful, at least successful enough to get renewed for a second season, I'm just very skeptical about Netflix's model when it comes to television series, because it seems like they're very trigger happy about canceling shows so that they don't go beyond 3 seasons. So even if that's enough time to adapt the first trilogy, that does not mean that we would get to go anywhere near the events of these other books, Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. I don't really know how to feel about that. I don't know whether or not to talk about spoilers. I'm assuming that it's okay. I'm assuming anybody who watches this is going to be people that have read the book, but I will just say I was very surprised by the way things ended for Pekka Rollins. I thought for sure that it was going to go in a completely different direction than how they ended his story. If you are new to my channel, feel free to have a look around at some of my other video essays that are far more elaborate and in-depth. I recently did one on West Side Story because I love that film. And then I also did one on Stardust because, wow, it did not age well, and I didn't realize I was going to have so many strong opinions when I went to rewatch it for the first time in over a decade. And if you are specifically coming from the perspective of being really into YA content and booktube related things, I'm not really a booktuber, but I do have 2 videos about Peter Kavinsky, because although I have not read those books, I have seen those awful films on Netflix. Peter Kavinsky sucks. He's a terrible character. He's a terrible love interest, and Asian girls deserve better. And while I have your attention, before we close off this video today, does anyone want me to do a video on Gold Digger? Because low-key, I've been thinking about it. Be sure to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and Vero, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!